Hello, this is Eden from HelixxVR. As many of us have, I've recently received my Valve Index. This is not an in-depth review, but I wanted to give my assessment of it after playing with it for a while and running some tests. I've spent about 15 hours with it so far, but there may be things which become more apparent in the long run. Now, as there's been a lot of drama with various YouTube channels and so on social media recently about this, I'll state outright. This is not a free unit from Valve. It was bought and paid for. Our only sponsors are you, the viewers. Your donations by PayPal, your subscriptions on Twitch, and those of you who've hit the join button here on YouTube. You will help pay for this. Now, I personally got the headset and the controllers, but not the new base stations. When it arrived, I already had my Vive hooked up. The setup from there was pretty easy. I disconnected the Vive, connected the Index, and opened up Steam VR. It asked me to select a refresh rate, and it decided on 120 Hz. This can be changed in the settings later too. From there, all I really had to do was pair the controllers to the headsets, which was straightforward. They arrived with some charge, so I didn't have to wait. Now, if you've not done so with a previous headset, you'll also need to go through the setting up your room boundaries by drawing them out too. I'd recommend updating all the firmware too. One of the big attractions of this new headset are the index controllers, or the knuckles as they're also known. So I'll talk about those first. The new controllers strap to your hand and tighten up. You can adjust the strap angle too. I found that they're secure with small or big adult hands. I'm not concerned about them falling off. Unfortunately for those small and big hands, it can be awkward to reach buttons. I found that I have issues with pressing the menu button sometimes, while a test with small hands found that they had issues pressing the A button. Aside from that, I found them quite comfortable. I particularly liked using them for games with bows and swords. Now, the finger tracking I want to spend more time with to see if there's a particular position which works better or a technique, but just out of the box and strapping them on, I've not found it to be as good as I hoped. Quite often it mixed up fingers or held down two instead of one. This was the case in all the VR experiences I tried with support for finger tracking, and not just a particular game. That said, it does have a lot of potential, and in theory, it could add tons of potential inputs. While it's not completely hardware related, it's worth mentioning that many games don't work properly with the index controllers too. User created custom bindings partially solved this. Even then, there were games where I still couldn't do certain actions, like climbing or dropping weapons. Without the custom bindings, I couldn't even move in one game. In another, the angle of the hands were completely off. I find this quite disappointing, as Valve have been sending out dev kits for the controllers to tons of developers big and small, but the support just isn't there in a lot of games, and many devs have had these for ages. It's also worth noting that many people are finding issues with clicking their joysticks in, being inconsistent or impossible to do unless they are facing certain directions. If nothing else, this is affecting sprinting in certain games. Now, moving on to the display, I was more impressed there. Everything looks very sharp, and I couldn't notice any screen draw effect unless I was specifically looking for it. The field of view doesn't match the Pimax, of course, but it is better than the Vive or Rift headsets. How much depends on how close you bring the lenses to your eyes. They can be brought incredibly close. I had to move them out a bit because the closest they're actually touching my eyebrows. A little more horizontal field of view would have been nice, but I'm happy with it as it is. I've not noticed any distortion. The black levels and colours aren't as good as the Vive or Vive Pro with their OLED screens, but I do think that they beat the Pimax 5K. I'd say the display is good enough in this respect that most people won't notice unless they're playing a game with a lot of dark environments, like Elite Dangerous. One area the display does fail on is God rays. Again, I think that most people won't notice outside of specific games, but it's probably near the bottom rank for God rays. Now, as far as the refresh rate goes, I personally didn't notice any difference between the settings. I know that some people are more sensitive to this, however, so I'll note that there are settings for 80, 90, 120, and 144 Hz. Now, moving on to the other parts of the headset, it's the most comfortable out of the box headset I've tried yet. The padding quality is excellent. It feels balanced well, and I was able to wear it for hours without an issue. The face gasket is magnetic and easily removable, coming off even by mistake, but it seems to be secure when it's in use. This is good for easy cleaning. The audio quality is very good. Quite a few people have praised it. It's worth noting that anyone around you can hear the noises from the headset too if you're using the default headphones, so you may not want to play certain types of content on this headset with people nearby. You can remove the off-ear headphones for your own headphones if needed. As for the audio inputs, the microphone is actually very high quality. You can hear an example of this if you go look at our live stream for the first impressions of the Valve Index. There is an expansion port with a USB under the front cover. They call this the frunk. It's a nice feature, but it doesn't seem too useful for now. The tracking is brilliant, as you'd expect from Lighthouse tracking. Again, this is with the original Vive Lighthouses. Wireless is apparently being looked into by Valve, but it's not possible as it stands. Lastly, it's worth noting that many people have had issues with the USB connectivity and showing the headset not connected sometimes. I personally had this too, but it seems to have been resolved after a firmware update. Now, that about wraps things up. Overall, I do think that the Valve Index is the outright best VR headset I've tried, beating both the Vive Pro and the Pimax 5K. It certainly does have its issues though, particularly when it comes to the controllers. This was Eden from HelixxVR. As always, if you enjoyed this, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that alert button for new video alerts.